Thank the Australian media for their attendance over the last 8 days. It's been a very busy period, and I'm sure that you're, feeling it a bit too. But we're on the home stretch now, and this morning I had a very successful bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Thailand. That was so important. These three meetings, the ASEAN East Asia Summit, the G20 and APEC, are all important forums to advance Australia's national interest. We live in an increasingly globalised world, one where events in one part of the world on security, like we've seen with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, impact the whole world. We've seen that have an impact on the global economy. But before that, of course, we saw the pandemic, a health issue, spread around the world. We've also seen, of course, climate change, and at this time, as the Conference of the Parties is occurring at Sharm el-Sheikh, we're reminded that you can't have one nation solutions to issues which are global. They require international cooperation. They require goodwill, and they require countries to work together for our common interest. And that is what I have sought to do over the past 8 days, is to send a message that Australia wants to engage constructively, to work with our partners in the region and indeed throughout the world. And I believe that Australia has achieved some significant steps forward over the past 8 days. We have re-engaged firstly with ASEAN through the ASEAN-Australia Summit, reaffirmed Australia's position of the centrality of ASEAN in our region. We reinforced that with the increased support that we have for aid in Southeast Asia, for the increased number of economic agreements we have with this region, including with the ASEAN itself, but also with the appointment of Nicholas Moore as the envoy to Southeast Asia, a practical step that will make a difference, someone who brings with him enormous capacity but also great standing, not just in Australia but in the region as well. We advanced our economic standing as well with the business community, with giving a keynote address to the B20, one of only 3 leaders to address the B20 meeting, attended by thousands of leading business people, the largest delegation of which was from Australia. And I thank Jennifer Westacott and the other all key business leaders for their attendance. Andrew McKellar from ACCI and Ines Willis from AIG were also in attendance, as well as Andrew Forrest and other leading business people. We also had important bilaterals with our AUKUS partners. It was great to catch up again with the US President Joe Biden to talk about AUKUS, to talk about the challenges that are there in the global economy, but also to talk about how Australia can benefit from his groundbreaking Inflation Reduction Act that was passed in the United States this year, that will present opportunities for partners with the United States as we transition and transform our economy in a carbon-constrained world. And I get on very well with President Biden, and it was also an opportunity to congratulate him on what was an outstanding result in the midterm elections in the United States. And of course, with our friends from the UK, it was my 3rd UK Prime Minister I sat down with. Rishi Sunak and I sat next to each other in a number of events. We were able to develop a strong relationship that's so important for us, given our historical and our economic ties as well. As part of that, we advanced timetables for trade deals with the United Kingdom. Will be settled in the first quarter of next year. There's been some delay on the UK side for obvious reasons, because of their bringing down another budget statement, but they will get that done. We got that commitment in the first quarter of next year. In addition to that, the Indian advancement in our trade engagements will be secured this year, and I will lead a delegation, including a business delegation, to India in the first quarter of 2023, before the leaders of the United States, India and Japan visit Australia for the Quad meeting, which we'll host in 2023. We also advanced progress on the deal with the European Union that is so important for us. We did that with direct discussions with the European Union leaders themselves, with Ursula and Charles, but also with individual countries who I met with, Pedro Sanchez of Spain, Giorgia Meloni, the newly elected Prime Minister of Italy, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, talking about the importance of the EU deal, and I'm very confident that this can be a very good one for Australia. We also, a theme over the last week has been a recognition of Australia's climate change position. That has transformed the way that we're perceived in the world. Taking climate change seriously is the entry fee to get a seat at the table of international diplomacy and to be taken seriously by those who care about the global economy as well. We all know the pressures that are on, and this was well received in a number of leaders, including this morning. The Prime Minister of Thailand acknowledged that. At the same time, I've been talking to leaders securing support for Australia to host a conference of the parties for the UNFCCC in 2026 in Australia, which we would co-host with our Pacific friends. We had, of course, the first bilateral meeting with China since 2016. It was a constructive meeting. It's always good to have dialogue, and we engaged formally, of course, at that bilateral meeting, but of course there was other interaction with Chinese leaders informally as well over the past week, and I regard it as a step forward, and that we need to step forward together. We had bilaterals with Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. The Philippines is coming up, Indonesia, France, India, UK, Chile, Japan, Korea, Canada, New Zealand and PNG. We had sit-down meetings as well. So it's been a busy time. We also had a meeting with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, where I reinforced Australia's support for the struggle of the people of Ukraine to defend their national sovereignty. And the outrageous aggression by Russia, we were able to call out with Russia in the room at the forums where they were present at both the G20 and at the East Asia Summit. We also, of course, made strong statements about the actions that Russia has taken in the past week while these summits were occurring, escalating the targeting of infrastructure and energy, and of course with consequences for people in the Ukraine with their escalation. We participated in a multilateral forum yesterday convened by the US Vice President on the North Korean use of intercontinental ballistic missiles. And these launches we called out. We have supported the calling of a UN Security Council emergency meeting to deal with this. We secured a very positive leaders' declaration at the B20 meeting, something that was always going to be a difficult outcome to achieve, but it was achieved, and I pay tribute to President Widodo and his very strong leadership at the G20. He was a gracious host. Indonesia put such effort into hosting the G20. It's the biggest event internationally that's been held in Indonesia. The relationship with Indonesia is one that I place great stake in. They will be, along with India, in the top 4 economies in the world in the coming period, and we need to increasingly engage with them, and I'm hopeful that President Widodo will come down to Australia for our bilateral meeting next year. In today's globalised world, as I said, the challenges can't be dealt with just by nation states acting alone. We need to have cooperation, and that is what I think we've seen the shoots of over the last week. It has been very constructive, and I leave these meetings with my optimism that the world and the region can guide the economic recovery and seize the opportunities that come from the transition to net zero to create a better future that you've heard me speak about before. That better future can only be achieved if we're engaged, if we have standing in the world, if we're treated with respect, but also if we treat others with respect as well. That's what I've sought to do in having the great honour of being Prime Minister at these forums. And I'll just conclude before taking questions by saying that it was a highlight for me, the release of Sean Turnell as well, and I spoke to the ASEAN leaders before that decision was made, and since that decision has been made and Sean is now at home with his wife, I have reiterated my very sincere thanks on behalf of the people of Australia for that very good outcome.